All right, let's get started. So, good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop. I'm Gary Grotto, the executive editor of the Arizona Capital Times. And for the next hour, we're going to discuss a new approach to educating and supporting Arizona's foster children. Every year, 1,100 children transition out of the Arizona foster system, and they face uncertain futures. And today we're going to hear about what they face and how the state's career and technical education districts, or CTEDs, as you're going to hear them called here, can play a role in helping foster youth successfully transition to life as independent adults. But first, I want to thank our sponsor, East Valley Institute of Technology. EVIT has 3 campuses throughout the East Valley where they offer tuition-free career and technical education for high school students and tuition-based training for adults. The more than 40 course offerings range from 3D animation, fire science, machining technology, surgical technology, and welding. And EVIT strives to change lives by loving its students and serving its communities with a career and college preparatory training experience that produces a qualified workforce, meeting the market-driven needs of business and industry. Thank you, EVIT. And now I'd like to introduce our panel. First, we have Dr. Chad Wilson. He's the superintendent of EVIT, where he's led the CTED since his 2019 appointment. Born and raised in Tucson, Dr. Wilson's doctoral degree from the University of Arizona is in education policy and administration. He also holds a master's degree from Northern Arizona University and bachelor's from U of A. He's worked as a middle school history teacher, principal, associate, superintendent, and superintendent. And under his leadership, EVIT has embraced a spirit of staff collaboration and community service that empowers EVIT employees and strengthens EVIT's partnerships with school districts and other community organizations. Together with the EVIT governing board, he has worked to reduce administrative costs and increase support for teachers and students while being mindful that taxpayer dollars are spent wisely. Good morning, Dr. Wilson.
Morning, Gary. Thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure.
And next we have Rebecca Masterson. Rebecca began her legal career as a litigation attorney at a large Phoenix trial firm. While there, she was named a super lawyer rising star and admitted to Arizona's finest lawyers. After several years in the courtroom, Rebecca opened a boutique practice specializing in the legal and education rights of children with disabilities. She's a frequent speaker and writer on child advocacy issues, and she was asked in 2017 to help found Gen Justice, a Phoenix-based nonprofit dedicated to improving our foster care system. During her 5 years as Gen Justice Chief Counsel, Rebecca was the architect and champion of nearly 24 foster care reforms that passed in 5 states. In April of 2022, Rebecca went out on her own as a consultant, working with a variety of state and national organizations to improve outcomes for children. She's thrilled to be working with EVIT on their game-changing project for teens and young adults in Arizona foster care. Good morning, Rebecca.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on here this morning.
The honor's ours. And our last panelist is Representative Steve Kaiser. Representative Kaiser has championed improvements to the Arizona foster care system in his first term in the Arizona House of Representatives, where he represents Legislative District 15. And after redistricting, Representative Kaiser is now running for the Arizona Senate in Legislative District 2. Representative Kaiser is an ASU graduate, and he served in the U.S. Army as a communications officer and later as a civil affairs captain, deploying to Afghanistan in 2008. He's the owner of a residential and commercial junk removal company. Good morning, Steve, and welcome to Morning Scoop.
Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Now, before we begin, I'd like to bring our audience's attention to the chat and tell you to please submit your questions through that, and we will try to get to as many as possible. So to start this conversation out, I'd like to start with Dr. Wilson. So can you just tell us a little bit about CTEDs at first, what you do on a regular basis, and how you got involved in the foster care system? with a
Sure.
couple of programs.
So CTED's career and technical education districts are public districts that provide career and technical education that range from cosmetology to aviation to engineering to HVAC to plumbing, all the gamut. And we have an EVIT, we have the central campus and we have satellite campuses. And so what that means is that students can either come to our main campus and participate, or they can get the CTE offerings at their home high school. There are CTED districts across the state of Arizona that function very similarly. Some have a larger home high school central campus opportunity, and others do much more of the work in the satellites. What happens when students participate in the central campus is that they spend half their day at their home high school and the other half the day here. So as an example, my son came to EVIT and he spent half the day the morning at his home high school taking his math, English, and history requirements, and then the other half the day in the automotive program. And if you aren't able to come to the main campus, then some of the programs are offered at the local high schools. EVIT got into the foster youth space simply just because we desperately care about kids. And I know that sometimes that we say that as educators and it sounds like it's what I should be saying as a superintendent, but it's absolutely the case. Our belief here is that we can change lives by loving our students and serving our communities. And so because of that, we look at all different kinds of on-ramps and off-ramps that we can provide support in. And so we took a look at our foster youth population, and we realized that in many cases, that population was being underserved. And we believe desperately that if we got them here and gave them a passion for an industry and a career, that would translate to a paycheck. And so we hired a foster youth coordinator and began the process of trying to figure out how we can get more foster youth here. Admittedly, I was the most naive person in the room about foster youth. And so as we started down the road, we began to realize there are just a ton of barriers, a ton of obstacles that foster youth face, not only coming to a school like EVIT, but just in their general life. And what we began to realize is one of the major barriers was safe, affordable housing post completion of, post 18, once they begin aging out of the system. And so we began pursuing how we can create an opportunity for foster youth that are about to age out, who may or may not have finished high school. If they have finished high school, they can come here and participate in the CTE program. If they haven't finished high school, they can come here and earn a GED and participate in the CTE programming. And it was our belief that if we could create that kind of space, that we would then be able to help these young men and these young women truly change their life. And so that's kind of how we started leaning into what we hope to accomplish. And certainly we knew that it was going to be a heavy lift, and we knew that we needed a sponsor and a champion in the legislature who believed what we believed. And we're so grateful that Representative Kaiser was that individual. We believed very strongly that he was the right individual to champion this for us, not only because of his fiscal responsibility and accountability, but also his work in CTED, CTE across the state, and his commitment to making decisions that ultimately provide a benefit to our students, but also to our communities. And so we're grateful for the opportunity that we have, but also very much for Representative Kaiser for helping us get the dollars needed to build this facility.
Now, Dr. Wilson, when you refer to the space, you're talking about a residential living facility, right?
Yeah. So what we're hoping to accomplish and what we're planning to accomplish and what we will accomplish in the next 18 months is building a 64-bed residency hall on our campus here in downtown Mesa, in which 64 foster youth that are aging out of the system have the ability to opt in and live with us. While they're with us, not only will they, if they haven't completed high school, they can earn a GED. If they have, they'll take a CTE program. But also we believe that there's a lot of other wraparound services that can be provided and need to be provided in order to give those individuals the opportunity they need to kind of launch into adulthood in ways that right now they may not have. And so through the work of Representative Kaiser, we received dollars out of this last year's budget to build that 64 bed residency hall that we plan to open at the end of next year.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Representative Kaiser, can you tell us about the appropriation that you were able to get?
Yeah, this was as a new member, you're always learning the process a little bit more each month and day that you're down there. I've only served 2 years, and the process on this bill was fascinating because it was kind of late in the game. And so we had to really rely on the relationships that we have with members across the House and the Senate. And we were able to get it done because we had a coalition of people all working together. So we were able to all reach out to the different members in the House and Senate. And the fact that this budget request was allowed to be put through at the later stages of the session, plus the fact that this budget request did not receive a haircut at all during the budget negotiations, just points to how all members down there really saw and appreciated how important this was. So this was an easy sell to a lot of members down there because everyone understood how important and how much it made sense right away. So that really helped in selling this to my peers. And then obviously the coalition of folks supporting me were also reaching out to other members as well. And we got it through, and we got it through at 100% of what we were trying to get, which is amazing.
And how much was it?
It was $10 million.
$10 million. Okay. You may have said that and I didn't hear it. So Rebecca, can you tell us what life is like for somebody aging out of foster care?
I can and I can't. And I can tell you what the statistical outcomes are. I can't speak for a youth in foster care because I wasn't. And I think one of the most important things that Dr. Wilson and EVIT bring is an individualized program for each kid, right? Because each kid in foster care has a very, very different story. And I love that he's incorporating these stories and the voices of foster youth and former foster youth into the program. What I can tell you is that the statistical outcomes for these kids are just dismal, and there's no other word for it. In our state of Arizona, out of all of the at-risk populations that are measured in educational outcomes, foster youth graduate with the absolute lowest rates. They are at about a 40% high school graduation rate. That is below the homeless student population. That is below English language learners. That is below children with disabilities. There is no group that graduates with less frequency than these kids. And it's not, Gary, and I know you and I talked about this, and I'm going to steal the line that you were going to steal from me, but it's not that it's not that people don't care. It's that they don't know. Foster kids have the highest high school dropout rate. They have the lowest numbers in college. About 3% of these kids who are in foster care at age 16 and up end up in college. They have incredibly high incarceration rates. And if I can tell a personal story just for a second, and I don't like to share his story, but I was a volunteer special education lawyer for a young man in foster care. And I met him for the very first time at his education meeting, and he didn't have a parent to come. And so the state then has to provide somebody. And so I was acting as his parent, and I knew him for about 7 seconds before this meeting. But we sat down and I said, okay, kiddo, what's your plan? And he was 16 and he had 3 high school credits. And he said, my plan is to commit a nonviolent felony because prison offers me a GED, food, and shelter. And the worst part of that wasn't that that was a horrible plan. The worst part was that was actually a really well thought out, it wasn't a bad plan for him. And if there had been, and he has a success story, and I'm thrilled for this kiddo, but most don't. And if he had had a program like what Dr. Wilson and Representative Kaiser have championed, it would have been a game changer for him. He would have had hope. There would have been a place to live. All of the loose ends that these kiddos at 18 don't have, they're just thrown into the world with a good luck, would have been tied up with a plan and support. And so that's why when Dr. Wilson asked if I wanted to get involved and help this plan, it was an immediate yes.
Now, there are programs for kids that age out, but they can opt out of, or, it's an opt-in kind of thing, right? Where if they don't want to participate, they don't have to.
They absolutely can. At 18, legally, a child is an adult. And so it's really up to them. And Arizona does allow children in the foster system, young adults in the foster care system to continue until they're 21. But the options for these young adults are not appealing to them many of the times. And so this is a brand new, pretty exciting option.
And I think the biggest distinction, just to piggyback on that with this program, is the fact that, yeah, you can stay in that group home and for several years after you turn 18, but there's no guarantee that everyone else in that group home is as driven and motivated as you are to get a degree, to better your life, things like that. And so you may be around negative community that will actually draw you back or draw you down. And what's so exciting about this program, and what immediately resonated with me when Dr. Wilson talked to me about it, was the fact that this is going to be 64 foster youth that all want to get a degree, that all want to get a job, that all want education, and all want a safe environment to do that. And so iron sharpens iron. We all know that. Can you imagine what these 64 folks are going to do? They're going to create lifelong friendships. They're going to be able to support each other because they're all motivated and driven. It's going to be a great program.
Thank you, Representative. This seems like a project of love, actually. Can each of you just spend a minute or two talking about, what drew you into, this area of public policy, foster care? And so start with you, Dr. Wilson.
It's interesting because as an educator, you spend your whole life saying you're going to do things for kids, and you do, right? Very rarely do you have a chance to do something that truly will change their life. And that's what this is. So for me, it was an easy transition, because when we talk about what we believe as an organization, that we change lives by loving our students and serving our communities, I can't think of a better example of that than what we're wanting to create here. Opportunities that will truly change the life of a child. At the same time, will service our communities, because as we know that the foster youth have, as Rebecca indicated, it's a social issue, it's an economic issue. So we believe that this was foundationally and fundamentally who we are. And so that's what drew us to it, to be truthful.
Rebecca?
I wish I had such a great answer as that. Listen, there's always people who can't speak for themselves, and children are that group for me. And I've just been fortunate enough to be able to use my legal background and experience to navigate some pathways to improve their outcomes in their lives. And this is just such a hole that needs to be filled. And I am just truly really excited to be a part of the program, because these are kids that when they do speak for themselves, oftentimes they just aren't listened to because they don't have the support, and they're going to get it. And so I'm a little verklempt, but it's a group of kids that I feel very, very strongly about.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Steve, I'm going to put a little twist on the question for you. I mean, you mentioned your first term legislator. Had you thought about foster care much before, you came in and started learning about all these different public policy areas?
That's a great question. And no, I hadn't really. CTEDs had always been close to my heart because it was something I was really interested in doing in high school, and I wound up not pursuing that route. So I think I have where my love for CTEDs come from, and then the basic return on investment for the individual and the state and the family. But when it comes to foster kids, you're quickly confronted with a lot of policies, ideas, and suggestions that you had no idea about when you first come to the legislature. And that's the exciting part of the legislature, is you get to learn so much new information. But with foster kids, that's heartbreaking. And I think it's because it immediately makes you think of your own life immediately when you hear these stories, and you realize, makes you think about your upbringing. And I had great parents that loved me and supported me. And I think about all the times where they, helped me with, just basic stuff, right? Like coaching me through a tough day at school, or the bullying, or whatever it was, right? And I think about my boys now. They've got me and my wife who help and support them. But then there's a population of kids in Arizona that don't have that. They've got nobody looking out for them. And it's heartbreaking when you think about it. And they need better support than what they're getting now. And we need to get creative, because the status quo is obviously not working. I mean, how long have we had a great tuition program for foster youth, but only 3% are going to college? Why is that? I think it's because it's more than just money support. They need that community support. They need self-confidence. they need a mentor, things like that.
Thank you, Representative. So, Dr. Wilson, let's talk a little bit about the residential hall or residency hall. You know, you mentioned 64 beds. It's $10 million. And here's a taxpayer question. At what point are you know, you're going to have to manage it yourself and take care of those kids and, you know, get insurance and all that other stuff. So what's the plan?
So one of our commitments that we made in this process is that we needed help with the revenue to build the space. And once the space was built, then we would shepherd the operating the space, whether that be paying for staff salaries, paying for insurance, paying for, and we can go about that in a number of different ways. I can't tell you how many people have approached me wanting to partner and support the endeavor that we're doing. And we're going to take advantage of some of those partnerships that will help generate financial revenue. But it's important to me that the partnerships are the right partnerships. We're not a for-profit, obviously. And so folks that are going to partner with us have to have the same sort of mindset and heart and outcome expectation as we do. And there's those agencies exist. And so part of the revenue stream is going to be having grants and having financial sponsorship from outside agencies that allow us to do the work that we're doing without taxing the taxpayer. And some of the residents, as they transition into the living, since they've opted in, will carry with them some financial dollars that allow them to contribute towards the residency payment. So it's our belief that between what the students would be paying from the state, as well as some of the endowments and financial contributions that we expect to get, that this will be a cost neutral to the taxpayer. And again, to Representative Kaiser's point, looking at ways in which we can solve the problem and do it fiscally responsibly, yet also have outcome measures that we can provide back to the legislature so that we can have this as an opportunity that's not just here in the East Valley, but that's an opportunity across the state of Arizona. And I think that was one of Representative Kaiser's biggest goals in this. And I'd ask him to speak to that if you don't mind. You know, this isn't just an East Valley opportunity. We're hoping it's much, much more.
Yeah, I'd love to reply to that. So I don't even live in the East Valley. To get to EVIT would take a long time for me to get there. And I was the champion in the legislature for this idea. It's not because I was trying to bring home something to my community. It's because I recognize right away, A, how important this will be for our foster youth and for the state of Arizona in general. But B, I immediately saw the scalability of this program. This type of program should be on every community college campus or CTED campus across the state of Arizona. And one-time funding is easier for the state to do than ongoing funding. So if we can help build it, and then the colleges or the CTEDs help maintain it through the tuition and fees and things like that, it's just such a great win. And we have so much land available on some of these community college campuses. And rural Arizona, this is desperately needed in rural Arizona too. So if I'm reelected into the Senate next year, this will be something I'll be advocating for. Even if I don't get elected, I'll use my relationships down there still to advocate for this, because we will have a budget surplus again. And this would be a great investment if we can just keep these kids on the right track, and they will be successful to break the cycle, and the state will be better for it too.
Rebecca, you know, this is your world. Have you seen anything like this anywhere else?
No, that's why it's so exciting. What I've seen are some pretty cool programs that are insurance based, if that makes sense. They're medical based. They're for children that have some sort of medical or behavioral need, and they wrap them with support services. This is a completely different program. This is a wraparound service for kids like their peers might have. So what we're finding in this world where young adults are aging out of care is that what they're truly lacking isn't necessarily opportunity, because we actually have quite a few corporations and businesses in Arizona who would absolutely love to hire young adults from foster care. What we're finding is that they lack the connections to the workforce. Some of these young adults perhaps didn't grow up with families that woke up at a certain time and went to a job every day, right? They don't have interview skills. They don't have clothing skills. They don't have the perhaps appropriate professional versus social versus going out with your friends skill. And what EVIT can bring to the table that I'm personally really excited about are exactly those connections to the workforce. And that part is going to be really, I don't want to say easy, but it's already built into their existing program. They have foster youth in their program right now. They have at-risk kids in their program right now. They have mentoring set up. They have connections to their workforce. I mean, when you're looking at providing connections to the workforce, I mean, EVIT really is the ideal place to start. And so, no, I haven't seen this anywhere else in the country. And I'm going to steal something that Dr. Wilson said, because it really is sort of miraculous that we've got this marriage between a public schools and all of these other arenas as well. So just that was a hurdle that they've already overcome.
And Dr. Wilson, can you talk a little bit more about the wraparound services?
Yeah, so one of the things that we believe, students that are 18 years old and come live with us, their age may not necessarily reflect some of the needs they still have. And so we will partner with DCS and provide some of those continued wraparound services that exist. We also know that there's a percentage of foster youth that have mental illness, and that we want to be able to be in a space that provides support and make sure that they're continuing with the plan they had to manage some of the mental illness. And as Rebecca said, we also think there's just inherent value in things that many kids get just growing up in a stable home. Financial planning. We talk to foster youth and we take it for granted when we say, well, you're going to get a paycheck and you got to open a bank account. And there isn't any understanding of how to open a bank account. Not that they can't do it, they just have never been modeled for it. So all those little things that sometimes we just take for granted become compoundingly problematic in terms of transitioning out into adulthood. And so the wraparound services would be what you would expect in terms of the social emotional, working with DCS, working with counseling, but also some of those kind of life skills that we believe are going to be also equally important for the transition. Part of the expectation is that the individuals are also working. We believe that there's power in a paycheck. And so the idea that you come here, you live here, you go to school here, will help connect you to a job. So you work, you get a paycheck, will help you open up a bank account. So you begin earning credit. So all of those little pieces that begin stepping towards having a positive launching point post living at EVIT, we believe is actually going to be what these students need in order to have success. We also realize it isn't a quick fix. We're not anticipating students come and live with us for 2 months and then miraculously all is well. We understand that it's going to take time, as it should, not only to earn the industry certification and credentialing, but to really make sure that the students are ready to launch into adulthood. We've even talked about the possibility of once they've got their industry certification, they've completed high school, they're in the workforce, to keep them living with us, paying full rent for a bit longer in order for them to be able to have money that's saved so that they can leave and be able to go get affordable housing. So it's all those little pieces. It's the typical wraparound services that you would expect, but we also plan to build in a lot of those other pieces that just get taken for granted by kids who grow up in households that have stability.
And I'll get back with Rebecca and Representative Kaiser here in a second, but got a question from the audience from Kathleen, and she says, "What will the application process be, and what is the minimum age for this amazing program?" And then the second question is, will there be more staff to help facilitate all the other wraparound services these youth might need?
Yeah, so the minimum age, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rebecca, is 17, I believe.
I believe you've set it up at 17 because there are certain 17-year-olds in the system who are able to sort of age out into an approved program early. But I think your primary demographic will be 18 and up.
So 17, 18 and up, the application process is still what we're working through. I mean, part of what we want to make sure is that we build the program out before we build the building so that we can have space allocated for these wraparound services. And part of that is going to then include the application process. It's our hope that we have the application process finalized by spring of this year so that as we go into construction, we're being mindful that we're building the space in such a way that we can deliver based on the application. And the last part of that question.
It says, will there be more staff to help facilitate all the other wraparound services?
So there's going to be more staff here, absolutely. But our hope is that we still partner with some of those institutions and entities that provide those services. As I used to be a high school principal, and one of the things that was always interesting to me is you would have, a handful of foster youth on my campus, and they would get services provided to them by DCS. And that case manager then had to go to another high school and had to go to another high school. And the efficiency and effectiveness of having centralized clients, we think is also a value added. And so, yes, we'll have additional staff, but we're planning to still utilize the resources the state has in order to provide some of those wraparound services.
All right. So, Rebecca, kids that age out of foster care and or just kids that are in foster care, I'm sure they come with challenges to the school. Can you talk about that a little bit? What
I can a little bit. I think I don't have a percentage because the program is so new and being developed into to what really is an ideal program. But I think it's very possible, I'd say likely, that a lot of these students are going to come with some sort of 504 or IEP or a special education plan of some sort. And again, what's exciting about this program is EVIT already has such a strong presence with this population. It's really interesting because in my work, when I was a volunteer parent with the state for kids in these special education meetings, is you really do have to individualize all of these programs for the young adult. I have worked with young adults who, for example, when you go to the grocery store, they're completely overwhelmed with the amount of choices because this isn't something that's ever been on their horizon before. If you live in a group home, everything is taken care of for you. You come down, you go eat, and this is it. And so, for example, picking out a fruit snack is unbearably complicated because there's 50, right? And so that's one life skill that Dr. Wilson and EVIT will have to put into place. You've got the kid that's actually already got a debit card, perhaps, and learning how to budget and knows that they want to be a nurse. That's another program that they can individualize. I think truthfully, like any other population in a program like this, you're going to run the gamut. You're going to have to individualize the program for each student, just like you would do in any school program. I know that didn't answer the question, but they're going to have a variety of needs and a variety of interests and a variety of life experiences.
And how do you plan to deal with all of that, Dr. Wilson? To deal with these challenges, and I know you're familiar with them already, but
yeah. So I think the part that Rebecca is articulating, I think is exactly why we are doing what we want, why we're doing what we're doing. And so part of the challenges is just realizing that it is an individualized approach, and it does require taking time and spending a time with the student, understanding what some of their strengths are, what some of their assets are, what some of their desires are, what some of their goals are. We'll staff appropriately for it, but as silly as this sounds, and I don't mean, I truly believe it, I think it all starts with having a heart for what you're doing. I think things become more difficult if you're trying to do it because you think you have to, or do it because you're being told to. What we want to create is a place that people work and a place that students live who want to be there, who have a heart for it. And when you have a heart for it, those conversations and that time becomes a lot easier. And I know that sounds idealistic and it sounds vague, but I think all too often in education, we don't step back and say, at the end of the day, I'm going to make a decision that's in the best interest of this child. I tell people this all the time. It was really interesting to me when I became a dad, because I realized I would do anything for my two children, like anything for them, right? At the time I was a high school principal, and it dawned on me as I was going to school one day that I have the privilege and the pleasure of being the principal for thousands of other people's kids, and they love them just like I love mine. And so what would I want for my kid? And if we can hold ourselves to that anchor, make decisions that we would make for our children, make loving decisions, the work becomes easier. And I'm not minimizing it. It's going to be a challenge, but the solutions become much easier to find, in my opinion.
Representative Kaiser, you've already mentioned, rural. You would like to see one of these in a rural area. sounds like you're thinking about it. Are you actually in motion here with something?
What? Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I can't drop any bills until I know if I'm coming back or not. So that's kind of waiting on November
Mhm.
9th for that. But I'm hopeful that I do get reelected because I am very passionate about this. And I represent suburban North Phoenix. So I'm not even a rural member either. I just see that there's a need there, and that's a strong coalition of members too. And we need to make sure that to grow this, we're going to need to kind of ping pong it between urban areas and rural areas until we kind of get situated, unless we can do a bunch of these at once. So yeah, I'm very much leaning forward. I've got it down as a list of potential bill ideas for next year. But again, I do have to wait till November 9th to see if I'm reelected in order to drop bills. But in the situation where I don't get elected, I will find someone that has been elected and that I have a good relationship with, and I will be a citizen advocate for this cause and use those relationships and phone numbers that I do have as a former member to make that work. So either way, I'm going to help advance this either as a member or a volunteer.
Now, would a rural CTED require 64 beds, or would it be on a smaller scale, or
I imagine
completely different program?
You always need to recognize what the needs of the local community is that you're talking about. So it makes sense in EVIT for the space and the population for 64 bed. Maybe in rural Arizona, it's a smaller building, or they have an existing building already there. They just need some help getting it refurbished up to what it needs to be. So it kind of depends on finding a member that's from a rural community that's really passionate about it, because that would be a natural pairing. And so if you combine with somebody, another member, then you could learn what the local needs are. What's the local foster care population there, and then what's the space look like either at a community college or somewhere else, or a CTED type environment.
And we were talking a little bit before we started this morning about, even expanding this to community colleges, and is that just still on the napkin, or just some ideas on a napkin, or do you think that's something that's feasible?
Yeah, I think it's completely feasible, and I'm a huge supporter of community colleges for a lot of reasons, and kind of advancing community colleges with ability to do four-year degrees, ability to do more trades out of community colleges, because the return on investment is so good for the individual. It's affordable, it's fast, it's in their community. They don't have to leave and find a new place to live in a different city. They can stay close to family and friends and support networks. So it just makes so much sense to expand this out to community colleges. They generally have a lot more space on their campuses too, where you can build something if need be. And then they're doing a lot more with four-year degrees and trades as well. So.
And Rebecca, we talked a little bit before also about the four-year universities and the law that allows them to, free tuition, but no housing, right?
My understanding is that housing is always the biggest challenge across the community colleges and at ASU, U of A, NAU. Housing is a challenge for this particular demographic, and so providing housing would also change this game for these kids. Yeah.
Representative Kaiser, so we know how things sort of played out this year with the legislature. They got a lot of Democrats on board to pass the budget. This is a budget item. What are the challenges going to be going forward? I mean, we still got an election, but talk is, and it might be a more conservative legislature, meaning fiscally conservative. How do you convince the fiscal hawks that this is something to spend money on?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And let's just assume that the election goes the way I hope it goes, and we get back there, and I'm in the Senate. Hopefully I'll be a committee chair, which will really help that. So being a committee chair, obviously you can have a bill be heard in committee. So that's the most important first step, is getting a bill heard through committee. And to your point about, how do you get members on board? The very first part is having strong relationships. So even, and I am I want to make this distinction because I feel like you have to say it out loud, but I am very concerned about fiscal responsibility as well. We've had these great budget surpluses, but that's not going to be forever. And I do remember the days when our state was selling buildings and it was cut, 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 cut. So that's not totally lost in my head either. So we have to be smart and prudent with the resources. But I think what you do in convincing, so you have the relationship first, but then you need to show numbers. And I think the numbers really point to success. You show the numbers of how much, what percentage of this population is incarcerated, what percentage of this population is receiving state aid right now in some way, shape, or form. And ideally, we can get to a dollar amount, what that is. And then I take that dollar amount to the member who's maybe not sure about spending $10 million on a 64-bed housing. And I say, listen, we could put 64 foster youth in this house. They could get a degree. They could be around other great individuals that want to get a degree. And then they're going to get a job. And then they're going to be paying taxes. They're going to be raising a family. They're going to break that cycle. And so that $10 million is this amount. But how much is it if we don't do it? And so I need to have good numbers in my back pocket when I meet with these individuals that I have good relationships with. So that's how you do it. Start with relationships and back it up with numbers.
Thank you, Representative Kaiser. Rebecca, you've written legislation here and in other states, and I assume advocated as well. And so what kind of roadblocks do you see in the legislature, especially when, like this was bipartisan and everybody talks about this being a state issue, but there's always roadblocks. There's always something.
It's really interesting because I was thinking of that while Representative Kaiser was speaking, and I was actually thinking, which once again, not a great answer to your question. I was thinking that in the past 5 years in Arizona's child welfare legislation, of which I've been involved, it's not been partisan. It has been, I know Arizona gets a lot of press in the national news, and I have to tell you that when it comes to protecting kids, we're there. We have gone down with some good bills, and if you're able to educate people about them and you're saying, I know you don't know about this problem, let me tell you about this problem. Here's a common sense solution to this problem. I personally haven't found that lawmakers on either side of the aisle aren't interested. In fact, they're very interested. And I think Representative Kaiser had that experience is you might not know about these 2,000 kids that age out of our state care system without a family, but here's their statistics. And this is how we're going to fill that gap. We're going to give a residential program at EVIT, and we're going to save a bunch of money by keeping him out of prison and off the streets. And I just have not had the experience where anybody has said, oh, that's a horrible idea. I think we should spend less money and more prisoners. Like, nobody says that. I mean, so the roadblocks, I think, are just exactly the details. How do you build this program? What does the program look like? What are the kids exactly? How are we going to serve them? How are we going to continue their odds of success and positive outcomes after the program? Dr. Wilson already hit on, perhaps that's an extended housing opportunity. I mean, those to me are more of the roadblocks, the details. Representative Kaiser was already a champion for the money. And I think I correct me if I'm wrong, Representative Kaiser, but I don't think you had anybody saying this is not a good idea. This is not a necessary idea.
Right. It was amazing. It was amazing how well that went through the system. It was very late in the game, which is always very dicey to get something done. And then to not get a haircut also is amazing. So a lot of budget items, they'll be like, yes, we can do that, but we got to, take a couple % off to fit everybody, whatever. But it went through 100% because people recognize it's a smart idea and they know there's a need out there for it. And I think, Gary, to your point, I was thinking about this also, the leadership of the governor is going to be really important in getting this done. Obviously, I haven't talked to the Democratic nominee, but I have talked to the Republican nominee, and this is something that she wants to work on as well. So I think from a Republican perspective, and I'm sure the Democratic perspective, they would be totally supportive of this too, but whoever the governor is, having them getting involved in this is going to be really critical to success as well.
Okay. So, Dr. Wilson, how are you going to measure the outcomes for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a number of different ways that we're going to measure the outcomes. I think that it all starts with job placement and the ability for us to get industry certifications, to get the students in a career field that has a livable, sustainable wage. We're also going to measure along the way some of those kind of soft skill wraparound services that we talked about, making sure that those are pieces that we're putting in place for those individuals as they kind of grow through our system. We also want to make sure that we place them in housing or help them get placed in housing after they leave us. As Rebecca said, and as I think was in the chat, you know, it's not cheap right now living in Arizona. It's getting more expensive. And so can we begin looking at ways that we partner with other entities to transition students out of our livable housing with a career, industry certification, job, and transition them into more affordable, sustainable housing. And I think it's going to be those metrics, you know, the number of students that come in, the number that get the certifications, the number of students we place in jobs, the number of students that we place in livable housing post exiting our program, I think are all indicators that we're going to use to measure the success of the program. We also want to make sure that we're mindful that we fully anticipate that there's going to be students that will come to us that didn't view themselves as college bound potentially. We see this all the time in CTE. Students that don't see themselves as quite learners oftentimes becomes great learners when they have a passion. And so this past legislative session, CTEDs were also fortunate to have legislation passed that allows us to offer associate degrees in some of our programs. And so we may find that a student comes here, a foster youth lives in a residential hall, was not having the kind of success that anybody would want them to have, finishes their GED, gets their industry certification, has a passion, gets a job, gets placed in housing, but stays with us and completes their associate degree in one of the programs that we'll offer, and then transitions from our associate degree program to one of our universities. So again, the post-secondary continuation of education will be another indicator that we'll measure in terms of outcomes for our program.
All right, and I have a question from the audience here. Now, I think you have, what, 11 districts that feed EVIT, or?
Yeah, that feed into EVIT, yes.
Yeah, so do you work closely with your school districts to identify the foster youth? And if not, how do you get connected with these youth?
So we do. We have a foster youth liaison that we hired, and that was kind of the beginning of our journey down the road that has led us here so far, is to really hire somebody on EVIT's end that can go help shepherd getting our foster youth here. And so we have the contacts at our local high schools. Our counselors also have contacts at our local high schools. But what we also find is that our connection and relationship to DCS matters, because those caseworkers understand more than anybody where the foster youth are, and can be advocates and resources to help students who might not even be in the East Valley, who have interest in participating in what we're building, to become aware of the possibility. So whether it's between our foster youth advocate, whether it's between our counselors, whether it's between our relationship with DCS, we don't doubt that we're going to have a number of individuals that we can work with to help make sure that students understand the opportunity that exists here.
And here's a question for Rebecca. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it, but maybe one of the other two gentlemen here can. Who will hold the liability for these kids? CPS?
Oh, wow. That's offering a little illegal advice, which I'm not sure I'm allowed to do.
Okay.
You know what? It's a really interesting, good question. It's something we're going to have to explore. These kids are all going to be 18 years old. And in some capacity, they have agreed to accept services from DCS. And so liability is a really, really wide question. And it only comes into play if somebody messes up. So really, let's knock on wood that they aren't. One thing that I did want to just circle back to, which is such a kind of something we forgot to mention, is that in addition to the workforce connections, one of the great things about this program is another reason that young adults don't have the same statistics as other students to graduate is because they move around so much. And we didn't mention that, but that's such a crucial part of this program, of the residential program, is we spent, I don't know, Dr. Wilson, a long time trying to discuss like transportation issues and this and that. And what if the young adult or the 17-year-old moves to another group home, and then we're just like, wait, Dr. Wilson's like, or they just live here, and we're like, so that's really one of the crucial components, is if we can minimize the placement stability, right? They have one place to live and everything circles around them. The outcomes have to improve.
And Dr. Wilson, I mean, you've already had some experience with the foster. I mean, you've got a charter school on campus, right? Am I
Yeah, so we're
characterizing that okay or correctly?
Yeah, so one of the things, like I said, when we started on this journey, I realized that I was the least knowledgeable about the topic in the room. And so, we went down the road of saying, can we just get more foster youth here at EVIT? And the answer is yes, except as Rebecca said, one of the real challenges is transportation and the students that potentially get relocated and moved and not having the ability to stay at their home high school or to participate in EVIT. And so one of the barriers that we think we can bring down is by partnering with Heritage Academy to open a charter school here, Paul Revere Academy, that will give preferential seating to foster youth. And to Rebecca's point, if students are here for high school on our campus and half the day they're participating in Heritage's curriculum, which is world class, have wraparound services that Heritage has agreed to provide, and then has the ability to earn one or maybe two industry certifications while they're in high school, does that give a launching point better than what currently exists? And so the reason why we are wanting to do that is because right now with the residency hall, we're very grateful, but that's trying to solve the issue at the end of the continuum, right? What we want to do is to provide solution to that end of the continuum that's desperately needed, but begin walking backwards so that at some point in time, wouldn't it be great if there wasn't that number of students aging out that didn't have the kind of life plan that we would expect for our own kids? And so we believe having a partner with Heritage and having a high school on our campus that gives preferential seating to foster youth is a step towards, again, kind of walking back that number. That's not 17, 18, 19-year-olds, that's 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And can we begin leaning in and creating opportunities that earlier that actually change lives? And so, yeah, but that school will open in August.
And I asked you, I sent you an email before we started. Do you have an anecdote of a success story of a foster?
Yeah, I do. I'm not going to say the young man's name just because I didn't feel it'd be appropriate, but he told me his story, and his story is just tragically sad in so many different ways. And my guess is his story is very symptomatic and reflective of a lot of students' stories who are foster youth, and talked about moving from home to home, talked about from high school to high school, talked about some of the things that happened to him, both emotionally and physically, to the point that he didn't see value in learning, and as a sophomore had 2 credits or something like that, dropped out of high school, and is here with us now in our GED program, and is in one of our industrial trade programs. And hearing him talk now about what the future holds for him is just heartwarming. His plan for himself is to complete his GED, to get his industry certification. If we can get our associates up and running in time to stay with us and complete his associates, transition into ASU, and at some point in time to own his own business. And why he wants to own his own business is because he wants to be able to begin employing individuals who have had his same life experience. And so when you hear stories like that and you realize that we have the ability to positively impact them in ways that maybe nobody else does, is heartbreaking, but also heartwarming. Another young man who one of our counselors was talking to, who's in the foster system, was having a bit of a difficult time, was on medication that he was supposed to be on. And so our counselor was working with them, and our counselor just said to him, hey, if you're about the age to transition out, if EVIT had the opportunity for you now, would you take advantage of it? And the individual said, absolutely, I would, because I haven't had a stable place to live. I haven't had a place that I could call home. I haven't had a place that made me feel like I belonged, and I absolutely would take advantage of that. The space we want to create isn't sterile, or it will rival any of the dorms. You'll see the new dorms being built at our colleges. They have a kitchen, they have a play area, they have TV area, they have study rooms, they have laundry, they have, it's a dorm, a quality dorm. And this young individual is saying how wonderful it would be to have a sense of where I could go until I know I'm able to go. And that, to me, those two make me realize that even though we have stuff to figure out, that we're on the right track.
All right. And I've had a few people from the audience ask the same question, and I'll read one. I'm super excited about this awesome idea. How do I get involved?
So I would welcome, I don't know how to drop my email into the chat. I don't know how to do that, but so it's cwilson@evit.com. Reach out to me and we can talk about opportunities. Like I said, we know that we're going to need help. The right help is what we need. And so, the fact that folks on this chat are wanting to help indicates that they're the right help, which is very much appreciated. So reach out to me and we'll sit down and talk about different ways in which we know we're going to need some help, whether it be helping us with the logistics of planning, helping us with the logistics of programming, helping us once we are under construction, recognizing that we're going to have to be sustainable, helping us with the funding model. All of those are areas that we're going to need some help with. And before we get done, I don't know how much time we have left. I do want to thank again, Representative Kaiser. We had ideas, but he turned those ideas into reality. And we wouldn't be sitting here having the ability to do what we're doing without the work that he did. So I very much appreciate the work that Representative Kaiser did. And to Rebecca, honestly, she's the smartest person in the room every single time. And I'm so grateful she's there because she's going to help us shepherd in a way that we couldn't do without her. So the two of you, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
I just want to piggyback on that. I think people want to help too. When we get into the legislative session, reach out to Dr. Wilson for sure. Let's get a list of names. And then what we would love from a bill perspective, getting things done, is calling, emailing, or even better is to meet with members. We'll identify who the members are that we need folks to meet with and just express your support of the program. If they hear from real citizens, even inside or outside of their own LD, that goes so far in getting bills across the finish line too. So if you're up for that, we really appreciate that kind of help. And Dr. Wilson, you've been very kind, but you've been an amazing driving force behind this. So really appreciate your leadership on this because it's been very impressive.
All right, we got 2 minutes left. Any last thoughts from any of you? I always love to ask people to speak extemporaneously.
I can't wait to see shovels hitting dirt and building happening on this. I cannot wait, because that's going to be the ultimate way to sell this, is to show it and to have stories about the great results it's had. So I cannot wait to see. I'm going to be poking Dr. Wilson, making sure we got shovels in the dirt as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Our goal is to have to be in pre-construction for the facility first part of the year. So we hope to have shovels in the ground in the spring, because we know part of the expectation, and fairly so, is the requirement for us to report back to the legislature and the governor's office in 2025, so that we can have students who have had success with us. So we're hoping to have you out here in the spring, Representative Kaiser, and do a little, I don't know what it's called, digging it up or whatever, groundbreaking. I don't know what that's called.
Groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking. That's what it is.
And we'll have a reporter there too, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. No, it's exciting. And, I think as much as I just get all excited about it, and I really do, because I'm an educator, and I think this really has the potential to systemically change a segment of students that we have as a state tried to change and have never really kind of put all the pieces together. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the opportunity for this to not just be an East Valley experience, but a statewide experience. So we're looking forward to that.
And while we're on the topic of, the foster care system, Rebecca, should I plug National Adoption Day? Right?
You know what? I think anything you plug about the foster system is a good plug, because the level of knowledge is so low. So yes, absolutely. And I'll plug it on behalf of my 2 adopted kiddos. So yes, absolutely. But one thing I want to say is it's really so rare in this world to have a great idea and then just have 2 people, Dr. Wilson, Representative Kaiser, say, great, let's go. And it just goes. And the momentum behind this project is just unbelievably inspiring.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I got to say, I've done quite a few of these morning scoops, and this is one of the more inspiring ones I've done. So, anyway, we're out of time, and just want to thank our sponsor, EVIT, and thank our panelists, Representative Steve Kaiser, Rebecca Masterson, and Dr. Chad Wilson of EVIT.
Thank you,
And
Gary.
Thanks,
thank
Gary.
thank the audience for joining us, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.